Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Paydirt podcast. I'm Tom Hannafin, and this is an interesting week for Penn State football because the 2022 Reese's Senior Bowl is happening this Saturday on the NFL Network, and 6 Penn State players have received invites and will be taking part in practices this week in Mobile, Alabama, and then the game itself, barring any catastrophes. So with that, to preview what these 6 players are looking like in terms of their future potential and how they're possibly doing down there in Mobile, what's happening with their prospects, we have a great guest. We are joined by Kyle Krabs. He is the director of scouting for the Draft Network, and you might know him from podcasts such as Locked on Dolphins, the Miami Dolphins podcast, and Draft Dudes. So he is there on the ground in Mobile, Alabama, and he's going to give us some insight in terms of what these 6 Penn State players are all about, what they've got going on, and what their futures look like. I'm talking about Jahan Dotson, Jaquan Brisker, Arnold Ebiketie, Tariq Castro-Fields, Jesse Luketa, and the greatest punter that humanity's ever known, Jordan Stout. So we're going to get to that here in a second. I want to thank you all for liking, commenting, subscribing, and turning on notifications. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action, especially as the playoffs continue on the gridiron. With a new updated desktop and mobile website, sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available now. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager all your favorite sports. The Paydirt podcast is presented by BetOnline, where the game starts. And of course, Funk Brewing is the official craft beer partner of the Paydirt podcast. The Citrus IPA and the Silent Disco IPA are 2 of my absolute favorites. Funk Brewing has a ton of different styles and flavors for all types of beer drinkers, 50 plus options over time. You can find Funk Brewing at your favorite beer distributor and grocery store. Trust me, their fresh, funky flavors will satisfy your craft beer loving taste buds, and you're going to want to stock up as the football season winds down, and especially for those of you celebrating Valentine's Day, either with a loved one or on your own. It's the perfect thing. For more information, visit funkbrewing.com to learn where and how you can get their fantastic products. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. All right, I am now joined by the director of scouting for the Draft Network, Kyle Krabs. Kyle, thank you for joining me. You've had a fascinating travel schedule over the last few days, and now you're actually on the ground in Mobile, Alabama. So for those that don't know, what is your life like in terms of the director of scouting for the Draft Network?
Yeah, so this has been a great week to try and get on the horn with you guys and talk a little ball. Friday had a nor'easter, and I'm up outside of Philadelphia, and then we flew to Vegas for the Shrine Bowl practices for a couple of days, and then today came all the way back to Pensacola and drove to Mobile, and we got Senior Bowl practices this week. So it's kind of what you're getting this time of year. The NFL schedule, we're the inverse of that. So when teams are kind of taking a step back and assessing, our gas pedal is down, but our group at the Draft Network is an excellent group. We've got 4 full-time scouts on staff, a couple of part-time scouts on staff as well. And we try to tackle this process as close to what NFL teams do as possible, where we're doing summer scouting and evals, and we do write-ups on them that are kind of base level. And then we'll watch the season play out. And then from there, we will return back to those preliminary write-ups. We will do a deep dive into the film, and we'll stick within our pre-described regions and stack that board based on, I do Big Ten. So I'm watching a lot of Big Ten prospects. I watch MAC prospects because I'm up in that area of the country. It makes sense. And then we'll get through the all-star circuit, and all of our scouts collectively will go through the list of regional grades and do cross-checks where we all watch the same 3 players on a given day. And we look at the report that was written and say, do we agree with this? Are there things that need to change? Do we need to make adjustments? And from there, we'll do that all of February, all of March, and what we have in April to work before the draft rolls around. And we'll have a consensus grade on probably 300 prospects with over 500 prospects in total written up. So really try to be as thorough as possible. And it's fun to do it from an outside perspective versus a team, because you're evaluating across all 32 different sets of criteria, whereas the teams have much more narrow scope, and trying to thread the needle and find what guys fit into what systems is one of the biggest, most fun parts of the job.
And you don't have to deal with the potential political minutia within these teams of
Correct.
who's getting their say or something like that. So
Right.
that's great to have that outsider's perspective. One thing that I always find fascinating, Kyle, is that the amount of opportunities for players to be scouted by NFL coaches and then to have games like you mentioned, the East-West Shrine Bowl, the Collegiate Bowl also took place. Now you have the Senior Bowl, which is a very long tradition. Feels like more and more of these are popping up. Why do you believe that is?
Well, I think no matter what level that you play on, if you could play, somebody's going to find you. And I certainly think with the Shrine Bowl, which in my opinion had one of the better rosters it's had in a really long time. I think back to the 2014 year that had Jimmy Garoppolo and it had John Brown, who was those were both top 100 selections, and it had Shaq Barrett, the pass rusher with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And when he came out, a lot of really good players, and you knew those guys were good players when they were there. And I look at this year's Shrine roster, and there's a lot of really good football players. So I think with the way that the league is spaced out and all the different levels of competition in the NCAA, and then you add on the layer that so many prospects and college players, when they make that transition to the pros, a lot of it's about fit and opportunity and structure that you're afforded. So that does require a lot of depth when you're seeing two-star recruits like J.J. Watt eventually develop into these absolute monsters. Some of these kids just didn't get exposure at the high school level, or they were physically late bloomers. And as a result, the Shrine Bowl this year has a wide receiver from Lenore Ryan that has a better NFL body at wide receiver than any of the other guys there. And he was not a FBS or FCS player. He was a Division II player. And I think that amount of nuance that's required here to project these guys is what allows you to have all of these events and all these exposures to all these different players.
And there's certain guys, Joe Burrow's lighting the world on fire, and we all knew based on his last season at LSU, well, yeah, this guy should be going number one overall. And obviously he had a long journey to get to that point. But for every obvious pick like a Joe Burrow, there's Cooper Kupp with the LA Rams. Eastern Washington, if I remember, nobody was really tracking the dude out of college, and now he might walk away with the MVP. So I find all this stuff really, really fascinating. So I'm thrilled to talk to you about this. And specifically, you said you're a Big Ten guy. You're on the right podcast because we're a Penn State podcast. We're all about Big Ten. We're going to focus.
By the way, my diploma on the wall's got Penn State on it. So
outstanding. I knew outside of Philly, Penn State guy, we would get along just fine. I'm glad the Believe guys set us up. So let's talk about who Penn State has going to the Senior Bowl. 6 players. It's one of the largest shares of individual players representing a school at the Senior Bowl. So it's very significant considering 7-6 seasons. Sometimes the record can mask what the talent really is on the roster. Were you surprised to see this many guys come from the Nittany Lions onto the Senior Bowl?
I was surprised to see like Tariq Castro-Fields is a name that, having watched and followed his evaluation, Jim Nagy, the executive director here, and his team is personally higher on Tariq as a prospect going forward to the pros than I am. But that's kind of one of those beauties in the eye of beholder things. And that's what happens when you're scouting for 32 different criterias. And Jim's been in the league for a really long time. And I know he gets feedback as far as, if they're on the fence with a couple of guys, he'll probably ask around and be like, hey, which one of these profiles is more interesting to you? So, no, I can't say that Jesse Luketa surprised me that he was here when a guy can play end man on the line of scrimmage as a defensive end, and then Ellis Brooks gets ejected against Wisconsin, and he's playing Mike linebacker to close the game and really helping them lock down that game and win the football game. That kind of versatility is going to pop for all 32 teams, because now you got appeal regardless of whether you're running odd front or even front. Ebiketie came in and had an excellent season this year in his own right as a pass rusher. Jahan Dotson, very dynamic player. Not surprised to see him. So no, I think Castro-Fields was kind of the one that I was like, I might have to go back and re-watch him as a player and see if I missed something versus what they see. So I'm looking forward to grilling Jim on him a little bit while I'm down here this week.
Yeah, and we're, for full disclosure, recording this on Monday, so practices get started on Tuesday. So by the time this airs, we'll be in the full swing of practice, but obviously you've done your evaluations walking in, and this is maybe just crystallizing some of your opinions more so to speak that way. So let's start kind of with the top of the heap in terms of the Penn State guys that are going to be there. I'm so excited to talk to you about all these guys. Jaquan Brisker, came into this season, I believe, ranked number 3 overall based by Pro Football Focus. And I really like the way that they break down individual plays and responsibilities for players. So I personally tend to trust that ranking. He lived up to the billing that he received this year as one of the best safeties in the country. When you watch Jaquan Brisker's game, is there anybody in the National Football League currently, past or present even, that you would compare him to? What is it about his game that is going to transcend at the next level?
Yeah, so not when he first came into the league in 2009, another Big Ten guy, but Malcolm Jenkins with the Saints, drafted in 2009. What he's become when he's transitioned back to play safety, the back half of his career, is a lot of what I see with Brisker, where he's not necessarily super rangy. You're not going to play a bunch of press one and ask him to be the center field guy in the high post and go sideline to sideline and have that kind of range. But if you're going to run cover 3, where he's responsible for deep third, if you want to run interchangeable safety stuffs and go too high, where he's going to be able to come down and get into the run fits and get involved in gaps, he might be playing on the hash and have to play on the edge and step up and tackle. It's the versatility with him that really pops. And we try to do player counts for all of our write-ups, and Jenkins was the name that I had written down when I wrote up Jaquan Brisker. And, obviously coming from Lackawanna, we were talking earlier about the depth and opportunities that are provided to guys. And Brisker transferring in is a great testament to guys that don't have that exposure early on and develop late. And I think he's a really cerebral player. Obviously, the play that he had against Wisconsin to pick the ball off on the throw to Jake Ferguson to seal the game is the imperfect embodiment of Jaquan Brisker as a football player. He's on the other side. He knows the tendencies. He understands Ferguson's their money player in the passing game, and they're trying to get in and get a key score late in the game, and he read that all the way. For scheme tendencies that I had written down for Brisker, I had multiple coverage shells, aggressive blitz approach, high usage of nickel personnel with shadowing assignments in man coverage. So the fact that he can do so many different things, like, okay, you want to play aggressive and you want to have him down in man-to-man coverage, I think he can do that. I just don't think he's a 4-3 athlete that's going to go sideline to sideline and be the next Ed Reed or Earl Thomas, if that's your expectation for him. I think that's probably a little ambitious.
I think the one thing that was fun to watch about his game is to see him, at least at the Big Ten level, the college level, he could play the run exceptionally well. He was often put in the box by Penn State to play the run. Do you expect that necessarily to be something that's asked of him? Because in the world of safeties, he's not the biggest guy. He's not built like Troy Polamalu to be able to go in there and basically play linebacker. Do you see that for him at the NFL?
Well, I think, and with the trends of the league and versatility that's so coveted now, and Brisker having that, like you said, he's not a big safety, but he's not a small safety either.
Absolutely.
I think about the Arkansas kid this year that came back and had a great season. His name's Jalen Catalon. But he's like 5'9", 190, and he'll still smack you around a little bit. But Brisker's like he doesn't have that glass ceiling over his ability to get involved in the run fits, and he tackles really well. So, and he plays. It was, I don't remember what game it was, but there was a short yardage attempt that he worked. He was on the second level. He was on the B level away from the run strike. And he came all the way through the trash and made the tackle at the line of scrimmage. And I believe they got the first down. But I remember watching that play with Brisker. And I'm like, wow, if he can play on the B level like that and has the feel and the comfort to run through all that traffic to scrape and trace the running back and collision him in the hole like that, that really makes me feel comfortable about his ability to be somebody who can play low down in, and the versatility to be able to stay in your base personnel or to go to 3 safety stuff and know that you can play him high, you can play him on the hash, you can play him stacked behind somebody. I don't think that's going to be a limiting factor for him because he's kind of shown some of those things, and he's playing in the Big Ten, which is one of the most physical conferences that you're going to have on the other side of the SEC from top to bottom for team to team.
And in regards to limits, for the bulk of 2021, he did deal with a variety of injuries, was in and out of the lineup. The Wisconsin game, which you mentioned before, I called him a zombie because he'd go down, he'd pop right back up. Is that any concern moving forward?
I admire the fact that he played through it and didn't shut it down, right? That's always, do you have that competitiveness? And sometimes teams have to protect players from themselves in that regard. It's something I'd watch, but unless he gets anything flagged at the combine, I wouldn't. It's not like I'm going to flag him for injury concerns based off of just kind of being dinged up and playing through it.
Now, before we get any further, what I'm about to say might shock you, but the greatest quarterback of all time is not just a GOAT on the field. He's a GOAT when it comes to investing, too. He invests in stocks, crypto, and even art. Now you can invest like the GOAT with Masterworks. Masterworks is the investing platform that lets you buy shares representing an investment in art from icons like Picasso, Monet, and Warhol. And even better, our price outpaced the S&P 500 by 164% from 1992 to 2021. In fact, early investors already received over 30% IRR from 2020 and 2021 from the sale of 2 paintings. This is your opportunity to join 300,000 other members and invest like the GOAT. Get priority access with their game day promo. Go to masterworks.art/believe. That's masterworks.art/believe, BLEAV. See important disclosures at masterworks.io/disclaimer. And of course, all of us involved in the Paydirt podcast are proud supporters of Thon, also known as the Penn State Dance Marathon. Thon is a year-long effort dedicated to raising funds and awareness for its sole beneficiary, 4 Diamonds at Penn State Health Children's Hospital. Thon is the largest student-run philanthropy in the world, committed to enhancing the lives of children and families impacted by childhood cancer. 4 Diamonds picks up where insurance leaves off to relieve financial stress and provide emotional support so that no family ever has to see a medical bill. Since 1973, Thon has raised over $190 million in the fight against childhood cancer. And in case you weren't aware already, Thon intends to hold Thon Weekend 2022 in person 2 weeks from Friday, starting on February 18th and running through the 20th at the Bryce Jordan Center in University Park, Pennsylvania. To learn more about Thon Weekend 2022 or to donate, visit thon.org. That's THON.org. It's all for the kids. Make a difference in the life of a child today. And on another personal note, we want to take this opportunity to put a spotlight on mental health with a new initiative called Tag Me In. Tag Me In is simply asking for people to tag in on the conversation and help strip away the stigma around mental health. Whether you're looking to lend support, you want to talk, you want to share, maybe you need some help. We invite you to join in on the conversation. We encourage you to make a video if you'd like, post it on your social media channels, and use hashtag #TagMeIn and hashtag #TagMeInUnited. At the very least, we want to hear from you. You are not alone. Tag me in. Visit tagmeinunited.com to learn more. So Brisker, a lot of people are expecting to be a first or second round pick. It's a similar projection for Jahan Dotson, the wide receiver. And it just seems like every single year, I did our last episode about Penn State wide receivers under James Franklin, and it seems to be the same body type, no more than maybe 6'2", 6'3" at the absolute tallest, 210 pounds maybe, but a basement of about 170 pounds, a basement about 5'10". He's right in that wheelhouse. He can make some fantastic catches. His route running is excellent, very strong hands. It just seems more and more, Kyle, that the position, at least at the NFL level, is trending towards these small-bodied receivers. Not everybody's going to look like Tyreek Hill and burn people for, a 4.2 40 or something, but just being reliable. Where do you see Dotson falling potentially in this year's draft?
So I think when we go through mock drafts, which we do every Monday over at thedraftnetwork.com, a different scout on staff, goes through the current draft order and tries to project and apply logic as best as you can for fits. And Dotson's one of those guys who's constantly popping up in the 20s, the late 20s, early 30s, right on that threshold, the back 8 picks in the first round, whether it's Tampa Bay if they end up losing Chris Godwin in free agency, whether it's the Buffalo Bills needing another option in the passing game with Emmanuel Sanders getting a little bit older. There's a number of fits that make sense stylistically. And one of my coworkers here, Joe Marino, he was speaking with Sean McDermott a couple years ago at the NFL Combine, and he asked him, what do you look for in wide receivers? And he says, I look for guys that get open and can catch a football, right? And you think about Jahan Dotson, separation, gets open, and he catches the football. You don't have to go any further back than some of these spectacular catches that he has on his resume. So I definitely think the trends of the league, as far as being more offensive friendly with the rules and contact and how they're protecting receivers, is allowing this body type of receiver to become more and more and more prominent. And, as a guy who can attack all three levels of the defense, I would expect him, despite the fact that it's a very good wide receiver class, to constantly be in that conversation all the way through till the end of April. Last 8 picks in the first round.
And the thing, when I look at his body type, guys like Hollywood Brown jump to mind. And then you also think of, regardless of the personality, Antonio Brown. And Hollywood Brown, I would argue, has been a bit of a disappointment, I think, in Baltimore, in that he was somebody who was projected to be pretty good coming out of Oklahoma and had a lot of hype, but similar build to a guy like Jahan Dotson. So if we're using the barometer of between Hollywood Brown and Antonio Brown, they are related. Is there any place in that you see Jahan Dotson falling maybe higher or lower on that scale?
I certainly think he could be a more volume receiver than what Hollywood Brown is. Hollywood being a field stretcher, and it made sense. Lamar is a passer. He didn't really have a lot of that accuracy, 15 plus yards downfield outside the numbers. A lot of his best throws, 20 plus yards downfield, were the shots down the middle of the field on your go routes and your deep posts, right? And so I think his role, Hollywood's role and usage, is a little bit more narrow based on what they are specifically doing for Lamar's strengths as a passer. But I think Jahan, depending on the strengths of his individual quarterback that he's going to have a chance to work with, can be a more diverse receiving weapon who can do more on the perimeter. He can work in the slot. I see enough separation and ability from him to be able to stack and get over top of guys, and he's quick enough that I feel comfortable that he's going to get off a press. I think he's a really multifaceted player. The challenge for him is you look across the wide receiver class and you see, okay, I can get Jahan Dotson in this range, or I can get 90% of Jahan Dotson in the middle of the second round if I want to wait and invest in a more ideal or rare body type to be able to find at a different position. So it's kind of a positional value thing for him, but I would certainly project him above the role that Hollywood Brown has played for Baltimore.
So Dotson and Brisker, the consensus is first round, potentially second round at the absolute latest. That is where it starts to get kind of interesting with these Penn State players that are in the Senior Bowl, because just about everybody after there, it is a big question mark in terms of where they're going to land. And you mentioned Jesse Luketa earlier, so I'll pick up with him. I find him to be the most fascinating case. You talked about it, can play DN, can play all three linebacker spots. What base defense does Jesse Luketa end up playing in the National Football League, and at what position?
Yeah, so I think he's a hybrid linebacker type, and he's really fascinating to me. I like his work out of a 2-point stance. I think he's a little raw as a true pass rusher to win off the edge and be somebody who's featured in that role. My comp for him is Uchenna Nwosu, who was drafted in the third round by the Los Angeles Chargers. And he's a guy who's like a 4 to 6 sack a year kind of guy, but whether you want to play under fronts and put him over top of tight ends and say, he's not getting a free release off the line of scrimmage, I'm going to collision him and be involved in setting the edge against the run and really allow my linebackers to have a lot of space to flow behind me. He had a nice weigh. I mean, he came in this week, he weighed in 260 pounds. So I don't think that at that size, he's going to get too many looks this week at stack linebacker. And I think that's a great opportunity for him to showcase a role that he showed less of at Penn State versus being the off-ball linebacker that he was more frequently. So I think he's not a scheme diverse player or a universal appeal player. He's going to be for teams that either run, I think, odd fronts or your 3-4 defenses, and he's going to be the front side to the run strength, outside linebacker on early downs. And then if you want to try to move him around on passing downs, or if you're going to have a lot of manufactured pressure looks where you've got games up front where you're exchanging gaps, you can do that with him. Or if you're going to run even front, playing him in that hybrid linebacker role, who's that Sam linebacker who's walked up on the line of scrimmage and really helping to set the edge. I think that's where his value is at its greatest based off of what he showed. But I'm fascinated to see if he continues to grow as a pass rusher, because he's got really heavy hands and he's got some good length. So that's a nice recipe for the NFL level to win as a pass rusher if he can build that out.
The speed is going to be the question. I'm very curious to see how he does the remainder of this week and as we get closer and closer to the draft. One thing I'm always fascinated about, and maybe this is a little off topic, obviously Jesse Luketa is a Canadian prospect, plenty of
Yeah,
Canadian athletes that are playing in the National Football League. I happen to be one of those junkies that watches the Canadian Football League, and it's very easy to
good for
identify
you.
the
Great
next
minds think
best
alike.
the next best professional football talent on the planet outside of the NFL is playing north of the border. And for one reason or another, Americans don't seem to watch it. Are are American fans sleeping too much on the ability that is coming from Canada? One that jumps to mind is Chase Claypool, the wide receiver for the
Yes.
Pittsburgh Steelers. And there's many more.
Yes, there's no question. And this has been a rapid push over the last 3 or 4 seasons. I think about Javon Holland, whose dad played up north, and he was one of the best safeties in football for the Miami Dolphins this past year. And you're starting to see a consistent push of 3, 4, 5, 6 legitimate top 150, top 200 prospects that are Canadian background, and they're getting their feet wet there before they come down. So, we always joke about when the CFL season starts that we're going to commit podcast time to it, whether anybody watches it or not, because it's football. How do you not enjoy it?
Yeah.
And
We should
those
talk about that
parallels.
offline sometime. Yeah.
Well, we'll bring you on Draft Dudes, and we can talk CFL all season long, and you'll
Hell
officially be
yeah.
a Draft Dude alumni. So yes, we're sleeping on Canadian
Awesome.
prospects for sure.
I'm very excited for Jesse because he's worked his butt off for a number of years, and I respected that he played in the Outback Bowl and then the next day declared, all right, I'm going to the NFL draft. So not a lot of guys do that now, and there's no real right or wrong way anymore to go to the pros with all the opportunities to go early, name, image, and likeness opportunities. So I just like the way Jesse went about his business. So hope the best for him. Keeping on the defensive side of the ball, since you mentioned Tariq Castro-Fields as well, he's somebody that I genuinely like his game. Penn State didn't put him in a ton of bad situations last season. I think Joey Porter Jr. came under more fire just because of issues at the point of contact and penalties, et cetera. And very often, if you would watch a Penn State football game, you didn't hear Castro-Fields' name called all that much by broadcasters or really get involved in any bad situations. So is he... what does he translate to at the next level?
Yeah, I think he's the comp I have down for him is actually another Penn State guy, Jordan Lucas. I think his movement skills. I think he's a sufficient NFL athlete, and I think he has plenty of physicality in his game. But I'm concerned about his ability in space to be able to match on the outside in man-to-man coverage. If you were going to ask him to do that on the perimeter against NFL wide receivers. So I think he's somebody who's going to have to find that niche role within whatever roster and opportunity he gets to have that opportunity to really stick on a team. And I know that's kind of me personally. I think his projection for coverage that I like best is when he's playing in a half turn. So he's playing cover 3 and his kind of hips are open to the field. His eyes are in the backfield. He's going to keep stuff in front of him on the outside, play deep third. And then that way you can come up and just make sure that you're tackling in front of you as compared to being at the line of scrimmage and having to turn and flip and carry guys vertically. There's a lot of dynamic receivers on the outside that I didn't quite see that level of movement skills that gave me great confidence there. But this is also part of the beauty about this draft process is if he comes down here this week and he knocks it out of the park and he's playing press man and he's staying sticky on all these wide receivers, like I already alluded to, might have to go back to the tape on Castro-Fields and say, okay, Jim Nagy and his staff very clearly saw something in him. He showcased things that I didn't see when I first watched him at Penn State. What am I missing? I'll go back, watch a couple other games that I didn't get a chance to watch the first time through when I first wrote about.
One thing that's been fascinating through these NFL playoffs is the defensive collapses. And we've seen some fantastic games that have gone down. Bills Chiefs jumps to mind as what in the world went down, not only for those defenses, but especially the secondary. So you're getting to rub elbows with a lot of these evaluators. How high is the scrutiny for players in the secondary as they're being scouted in 2022?
Yeah, it's a tough way to make a living, right? You got to have a certain kind of demeanor to be able to be on an island and, every single play, and you're going to give up plays from time to time and forget it immediately and go on to the next play. And it's a lot of trust in your technique. It's a lot of trust in your eyes. It's a very instinctual position. And that's why getting a chance to be around these guys, not just on the field and seeing how they recognize route combinations based on what the splits are and whether it's 3-by-1 or 2-by-2 or down and distance situation, kind of understanding the sticks and where to play. But also getting these guys in the meeting rooms and having interviews with them is a critical layer to be able to kind of uncover, like, okay, like how quickly does he digest information both in a football setting and a non-football setting. And then you're looking for those guys to have an edge. If you're kind of a docile guy, like, that's not to say that you're guaranteed to not have success. But if I get a docile guy and I get a guy who's got a real edge to him at that position, and I can favor them similarly as players on the field, I'm going to take the guy with the edge every single time, because you need to have kind of that dog mentality about you to survive based on, we talked about the trends of the league are so space oriented. They've really handcuffed corners. You can't really play with a lot of physicality anymore. It's tough. So you got to be relentless mentally. And I think that's one of the good showcases for these all-star events in the NFL Combine, that these guys are going to have a chance to showcase to evaluators.
Sticking on the defensive side of the ball for Penn State, their last defensive player that will be at the Senior Bowl is defensive end Arnold Ebiketie. I love this guy's story. Transferring from Temple to Penn State, gets one season as a Nittany Lion, and immediately from the Wisconsin game shows up big, gets a couple sacks, blocks a field goal attempt, and very quickly establishes himself as one of the best defensive linemen in the Big Ten. And mind you, this is a conference that has Hutchinson and Ajabo just ruining people's lives, playing for the Michigan Wolverines. And what's his name? Ebiketie came out number one in tackle for loss within the conference. So the one thing I really like watching his game and turning on the film is his ability with his hands. He might not be the biggest or the fastest guy, but he is very good at fighting off tackles or defend or blockers with his hands. What have you seen when you throw on the tape of Ebiketie?
Yeah, so I have him graded as an early third-round value. So he's going to be somewhere for me personally in that 60s to 70s range at this point in time. And when we get to cross-checks, I'll get to watch 3 more games of him, and I might juice his grade a little bit. But the comp I have here is Philadelphia Eagles defensive end Josh Sweat coming out of Florida State, where kind of a height, weight, speed type guy. And he came in down this week, and he's at 250 plus. And that's a great weigh-in for him. Because he's a really bursty guy. I think he's going to make a lot of noise early in his career as a designated pass rush specialist. I think he still has some room to grow as far as how he plays the run, but I agree with you with his hands as a pass rusher, his inside counters and that kind of rip and dip, reduce that inside shoulder, and really well timed to be able to force missed hands on the outside. And you don't want to be a guy who's a 250-pound guy where you might not meet the thresholds to be a 5-tech and play in a tight alignment in an offensive tackle. I think he's going to be better served in a 7 or a 9. Those wide 9 defenses that really encourage those first step defensive ends to get upfield and create chaos. I think that's where he wins. But if you're going to play that style, you can't be spending a lot of time dancing with offensive linemen who are getting their hands on you. So I think that's why his hand timing is really, really important. And I thought the best game that I watched Wisconsin, Auburn, Iowa, Ohio State, Michigan. I thought Iowa was the best game that he played. And when you consider Iowa's history as being a very good team to run the football, a team that has a lot of physical offensive linemen and is an offensive line factory, he really tested those guys. And I think he's somebody who is not dissimilar to Jahan Dotson, going to have to beat the players around him within his respective group. But the nice thing about pass rushers is it's kind of a pick your poison. Do you want a 280-pound guy like Logan Hall out of Houston who can play inside at 3 technique on passing downs? Do you want a Nick Bonito who's a 235-pound hybrid linebacker who can play off the ball as well as being an end man on line of scrimmage? Or are you going to run this wide 9 defense that I think Ebiketie is? That's where I really favor his projection. So different teams are going to be looking for different things. And if a team falls in love with him, I wouldn't be surprised to see it at all to see him outperform the projection that I just gave you of the 60s or 70s in my personal rankings, because they're going to have their own criteria that they're looking for.
I just love what you said earlier in terms of it doesn't matter really where you play. Somebody's going to find you. But do you believe the jump for him from the American Temple to the Big Ten, Penn State, really did it for him? A year ago, maybe when you were evaluating him, did you see these types of traits that might lead to this moment? Yeah.
Yeah. I knew he was a nice speed rusher, but I watched him at Temple, and it's like, okay, like he's giving him hell, but what's he going to do with that jump and level of competition? And that's another value piece to these all-star events too, is you get to see FCS kids come up and play against kids from Alabama and so on and so forth. But for Ebiketie, I came into this season and I'm like, yeah, right now he's like a midday three guy for me. He's got some nice juice, but like I need to see how he handles the physicality of playing against more physical offensive linemen and how well he plays the run. And you mentioned the production in that regard for the amount of splash plays he made in the backfield. This year for him really helped him take steps forward. And I thought technically he advanced his game quite a bit too. So this year was critical for him based on where he was coming into the year. I thought he was going to be maybe a late fourth or fifth round guy. And I think he's got upward mobility to go second or third round now.
He's a great story. We will end, and no disrespect to specialists, punters, kickers, but we will end with the man that I have had a lot of comments about throughout the season, Jordan Stout, who I believe is being strictly evaluated as a punter. However, he was the kickoff specialist. He was the kicker. He was the punter for Penn State. He did everything, and I've said it a lot throughout this season. You tell me if I'm right or wrong. He is a great punter, but he is not a great kicker. What do you believe Jordan Stout to be if he is picked up by an NFL team?
Yeah, and specialists and projecting them is always kind of its own different breed, and a lot of times it's the interviews and getting to understand, okay, what was he asked to do? What were the techniques that they were implying? Can we implement something different if we feel like there's a dynamic physical skill set to work with here? But he has 100 career punts, and his average for his punts is 44.5 yards. I think that's enough to really grab and command your attention as compared to the kicking resume, where I think it was right around 2/3% of his field goals, and he missed a couple extra points this year. I wouldn't expect he's going to get too firm of a look from a kicking standpoint. You've got to really be a standout in that regard, as evidenced by McPherson with the Bengals and what he's been able to do this year as they've made their run through the AFC playoffs. But I think he's got a pretty reasonable shot as a punter to get into a camp, whether it's as a late round draft pick if he knocks this week out of the park, or as a UDFA, and get into a battle. But at the end of the day, a guy that can kick field goals as a punter, it's a more you can do league. So the fact that he has that on that resume is something that he can at least be able to point to and say, hey, you want me to hold? Let's try holding out. You want me to punt? I'll punt. And if we get into a pinch or the kicker gets hurt in a game, at least at the end of the day, your punter's got 30-something field goals on his resume.
Yeah. And he's been put in some situations where he's had to attempt a couple fakes and throw the ball a couple of times, not necessarily to a lot of success. And I hope that doesn't happen to him in the next level, because I just don't want to see someone like Ndamukong Suh eat his lunch. I hope he's okay.
Right.
Oh, man. Well, Kyle, listen, thank you very much. For those that are not familiar with Kyle's work, you can check him out on Twitter at Grinding the Tape. You're on the Locked on Dolphins podcast. You're on the Draft Dudes podcast. And then, of course, the Draft Network, which you can find on social media and online. You're their director of scouting. Thank you so much. What is Mobile, Alabama like this time of year?
It's cold, filled with NFL personnel. A lot of football practice and not much else. So if you're a football junkie, it's a great place to be. And they do a great job down here. I know this is a big part of their calendar year for the city. So Jim Nagy's put together quite a bit of things to kind of make this a destination attendance for football fans. And I would definitely recommend, if you consider yourself like a diehard football fan, do this once. Come down here, do the game. They do a lot of stuff with the prospects on Friday. They've got a football symposium where I think Nick Saban's one of the speakers at this year's event during the middle of the week, that you can go get dinner and have an event where you listen to them talk. So a lot of really cool opportunities, and come down, rub elbows with us at TDN and hopefully talk a little shop and talk some ball.
I'm very envious. If you're in the Mobile, Alabama area and you're listening to this, hey, go give it a check. Go give it a look. All 6 Penn Staters are on the national team, which is being run by the New York Jets staff. The 2022 Reese Senior Bowl is this Saturday, February 5th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern on the NFL Network. I'm sure I'll spy you on the sideline at some point as I'm watching the game. Kyle, thank you very much, and safe travels.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. I'm glad we could link this thing up. I know it's been a couple of days in the making. I appreciate your patience, and I'm glad we finally got on and talked some ball.
Made it happen. Enjoy the Senior Bowl.
Thank you.